Okay, colleagues, it's now 2 o'clock, so I'm going to start the meeting. Thank you. Welcome to today's Audit Committee meeting. This is not a public meeting, but a meeting that the public can attend. I'm Austin White, Chair of the Audit Committee, and I would like to welcome everyone present to the Audit Committee today. Before we commence, I'd like to outline the domestic arrangements for the meeting, which I'm sure you all know, but I still have to go through it for the record. We're not expecting a fire practice today. If the fire alarm sounds, please leave the chamber, then turn right and proceed down the stairway through the emergency exit on the ground floor. The assembly point is the public square in front of CAS beyond the fountain. Anyone with mobility issues should wait in the refuge area near the lift and use the intercom to call for assistance. The meeting will be recorded and published on the Council's website. By entering the Council chamber, you are accepting that you will be recorded and your images will be retained and broadcast by the Council. If anyone intends to record today's meeting, please ensure that this does not disturb the conduct of the meeting. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched to silent mode or off if you prefer. Thank you. I will now commence with the meeting formally. Welcome and introductions. So I'd like to welcome members of the Elections and Democratic Structures Committee, those members who are here with us today, who have been invited to attend this meeting on the proposed revisions to the Council's Contract Procedure Rules and Financial Procedure Rules. Item 1, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillors Kersley, Pickering and Pearson, and we also have apologies from our co-opted member, Dr. Stuart Green. Are there any further apologies that we know of? No. Okay. Item 2 is the exclusion of public and press. There are no items on the agenda where the public and press are to be excluded. Is that agreed, colleagues? Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? No. Okay, thank you again. Right, item 4, revisions to the Council's Contract Procedure Rules and Financial Procedure Rules. We're going to take it that members have all read the report, so I will ask Holly Wilson, Head of Strategic Procurement, and Faye Tyers, Assistant Director of Finance, to introduce the report. Over to Faye and Holly.
Thank you, Councillor White. In terms of the report, as you said, the report's there for information. We've not got anything to add, so we did wonder whether you wanted to kind of take it in sections, whether you wanted to cover CPRs or FPRs first, really just so that we can kind of concentrate questions in the specific areas. But hopefully the report is explanatory. We've tried to cover, what the changes are. We've tried to kind of explain the basis of the changes and reasons. So happy to go for questions, any comments, if that's okay.
With colleagues, yes, right, yeah, we'll. Colleagues, any questions? Yes.
Yeah, just sort of across, the CPRs, 0.6 across to 9, really, the explanation around the increase from 25,000 to 50,000. I to some extent see the need to up the value. But there's 2 points really. One, it's a significant leap beyond RPI and CPI percentage increases, but also it doesn't just. So if you'd have come and said, well, we want that to be 35,000 or something relative to the percentage increases, no extra things in place. But what we've actually introduced there is a completely new layer of checks and balances. So you've not really achieved what you were trying to achieve in an increase in the basic 25,000 to keep the process streamlined. You've actually, you've actually just put another layer of checks and balances in to get up to that 50,000. So it's just a question whether that kind of made sense. I've not really got an issue with the 50,000. It's just, would it not make more sense to say, well, we want to increase the 25,000 by whichever figure you use, the RPI or the CPI, but we would like this extra layering up to 50,000. Do you understand where I'm coming from on that? Yeah, cheers.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I think it's a good question, Councillor Shaw, and I think it's that proportionality, isn't it, in terms of the checks. And I think what Holly will explain is that although there's extra checks and balances in there in terms of that layer, they're potentially proportionate. So it's that proportionality in terms of there was different levels that I think Holly will just touch on.
Yeah, so you're on about the 25 to 50k where we've put in the best value form. So that level, that layer is a lot less onerous as what it would be if we had a formal quotation process, which is currently there. So and so I think I get what there's like another I suppose stage that the officers have to go through, which at the moment they would have to do a formal quotation exercise, which is a lot more onerous. They can actually at that stage do an informal quotation, so that could be via email or so on. Is that what you're referring to?
I think what I'm trying to encourage is that you look at the baseline 25,000 and increase it without any caveats against whichever figure you use, CPI or the RPI, in the sense whatever that figure works out. If it's 30,000, then we go, well, it's not going to be 25,000. All the things stay the same apart from we up the figure to 30,000, whatever it works out at, you know, relatively. But we also want this extra layer, which is 50,000. I see that there's some. I think that we're putting a layer there on a percentage increase, and a layer of administration on a percentage increase that we don't need to, because a lot might fall under. Say, I'm making figures up, obviously. I've not worked it out, but you know, we might skip under quite a lot under 30,000. And we're more than happy to go, well, actually, that's within the you know, the inflationary increases. So that's what I'm trying to encourage you to do, to look at up in that basic layer before the next layer of caveats and conditions come in. Yeah, still keep the 50,000 because it offers the freedom. We've got checks and balances in place. So that's really what I'm driving at. Scott, you're nodding. Do you see where I'm coming from?
I do. I think the layer of the additional test was, I think, probably my idea, and probably is a little bit around my caution in releasing the horses, to want a better term, and allowing a free-for-all. In terms of it's not RPI, absolutely it's not RPI. It might be if I could work out exactly when last time we reviewed it, because it was a long time ago, and there's been a lot of, I know we've previously had low inflation prior to the last couple of years, but it's a long time since we reviewed it. 30 grand, 40 grand, 50 grand, somewhere's in between. I think there are arguments for all of that. I quite like round figures and figures that people can remember and understand, which probably is another reason why 50. One of the things I was really cautious about is something that gets mentioned here, but also gets mentioned elsewhere, which is the use of local suppliers and the opportunities for local suppliers. And one of the things I didn't want to do was to lose some of that, because what we had before when we had quite low values was there's a lot of opportunities for local suppliers, and I wanted to keep that, and that's one of the reasons that we've got this kind of, we call it best value form. I don't know, I don't think I could come up with anything better at the time in terms of a title, but that's one of the things I wanted there to sort of establish, you know, this is what we did. You know, we haven't just waived all these other reasons. Admin and releasing some of that admin is a good thing, but I think it's from a kind of governance perspective, I'm more concerned about compliance and ensuring that we do that. Obviously, we report here either quarterly or twice a year, I can't remember, about numbers of breaches and waivers, and you're very keen on that, and I'm keen on it as well, that we try and reduce that as much as possible. So I don't really want to just allow a free-for-all. So 25, 50, 40, 35, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but it could have been any figure really somewhere in between. I think the point was it had just been a long time since it had been reviewed. It was important to reflect increases in prices. As I say, I was slightly reticent to just open it up quite as far as it would have been without that little safeguard in there, and maybe in time we can, or I can get more comfortable with doing that. So that was all the rationale for all of that, Councillor.
Yeah, I think that's totally justified. And without, and I'm not labour it beyond this, but I feel as though we've failed to achieve the first thing, which is to keep the goalposts the same, but increase for inflationary pressures. So, therefore, yeah, absolutely right. So, if the the inflationary pressure figure is 30,000, then why not exclude that? Why not that be the new 25? The new limit, and exclude the extra caveats. I understand you are the absolute drivers for it, and they're a good and positive thing that we don't suddenly go to 50,000. I just think that we're sort of introducing a layer in there at what, in effect, because of inflation. If there weren't inflation, it would be like you coming and saying, well, actually, it's from 20,000 now. We want this thing. But it's not it's not a big deal in some sense. I just think we might have just failed to achieve something at that percentage increase. But it's not it's not something that I'm going to knock back the report for.
I'm happy to commit to reviewing it in, say, 18 months' time if we went with it and reporting back. I say I'm just really keen that we don't lose that position on local spend that we've got, and increasing the levels theoretically could do that once it's embedded. So I'm happy to sort of review it in 18 months' time if we go forward and come back to yourselves, and maybe it's a mini amendment later down the line if that pleased everyone.
As well. The CPRs will be significantly amended at the end of next year anyway, because the new Procurement Act is currently working its way through Parliament. So it's not something that's going to, I mean, the big revision was last done in May 19. So it is obviously 4 years ago. So, but there will be another big revision in October. The new legislation will go live in October, hopefully next year. And the 25k is something that's still within the regs with regards to something called Contracts Finder, which I won't. So that's sort of the natural point that most authorities go to. And that's not changed with inflation. Okay.
Well, on the same point, I'd got some on the same issue, Dave, similar, but not exactly the same. And that is, you touched on it, Scott, there, about saving on administration time. But the reason for moving it from 25 up to 50, and you said it's quite a long time. I think I can remember when it was 10, but that's, I'd probably stayed, probably. Yeah, well, I don't remember that far back. So what I was going to say is they're moving the 25, that's expected to generate some savings as well and to achieve best value. It's not just purely to save on admin, is it? I just wanted that to be confirmed, really.
Yeah, I'm not in the business of changing constitutional documents to save a bit of officer time in my department. I think that would be sort of a Pyrrhic victory, because getting the documents amended take a little time in itself. So no, it's to achieve things wider and a reflection of obviously what we have seen in sort of generational changes in inflation in recent times.
You attract my attention, Faye. Did you want to?
Thank you. I think overall we're really keen that we still demonstrate best value. We're in a time where it's getting tighter financially, so I think to have that best value check in there is helpful. And I think as the report highlights, there's 51 contracts that this would have captured if it had been in place last year, 22-23. So that's the extent to then additional where there might not have been anything based on kind of your suggestion. That's going to be captured in this. And as Holly said, it's a lighter touch, but it's still demonstrating that we're delivering best value, which is our key priority, really.
Thank you, Faye. And with colleagues, if I can just hold the microphone for a while, I've just got to. While we're on, you mentioned there the number of contracts, and you keep mentioning best value. Those are my next 2 points. Because on page 2, para 9, the report states that we've got 8% of the number of contracts awarded were between 25 and 50. But can you tell the committee, Holly, I guess, what they were in financial terms?
Yeah, so for that period, it would equate to just short of 1.7 million out of a total value of contracts awarded in that period, which was 647 million. So, and that's actual total contract value. So that's not in a year. We've got contracts that run for 10 years and so on. So it's a bit hard to quantify, but it's when I've done the I've had the data analysis done. So there's a lot of 30, 40 grand contracts that run over a few years, and it would capture those.
On this point, on page 17, as we link into the rules themselves, para 17.1, it's the second bullet point. If anyone wants to have a look at it, it's on page 9 of 23. So can you explain to us, the committee, how the best value forms will ensure best value? For example, will they be in place as part of the process rather than afterwards, when the quote has already been accepted and the contract awarded?
Yeah, so the best value form will work as any contract that's procured over £25,000 they'll still involve my team, because of contracts finder and so on. And we'll provide them with that best value form at that point and say this will need to be completed. And it's varying levels of support which is needed with various departments. So and we'll support them to complete that. When we first launch it, there will be a lot of queries around what is this, how do I prove it, so on. The form's been drafted, and it will be around them getting things like informal quotes, using a local supplier, and things like they might say, we want to go with a contractor that we've used previously. We've got fixed rates, we can mitigate CPI X, for example. So there's going to be a multitude of different methodologies on how they can prove best value, but not, like Scott said, still proving that they've actually thought about it and done something about it, not just done something because it's easy. Yeah.
Phraseology that will demonstrate it is best value. It's something we need to be thinking about here, not there, isn't it? Yeah. Fine. And I know I said finally, but I just have one more. Because we're the audit committee, we had head of internal audit here, and I noticed in the text there's a phrase that says, these will be audited to ensure best value was sought and achieved. What did that mean, Holly?
It will mean that desk is falling to bits. It will mean that we will review those forms when they come in, but obviously we will be part of it. But again, some departments might be more self-sufficient, but we will audit them when they come in and make sure that they're submitted with any award between 25 and 50k.
And when you say we, that's you and your
Sorry,
team rather
my
than Pete
team.
and his internal audit
yeah,
team.
it won't be internal audit, it will be my team that do the audit.
Thanks very much, Ollie. Just going back to one of Austin's queries, I didn't want to interrupt him because Columbo had one last question.
I thought
On page 3, just regarding these 51 contracts out of the 653, you mentioned they were worth 1.7 million, averages out about 33,000. In terms of the distribution of those contracts statistically, are we seeing that there's perhaps any particular distribution of contracts between certain levels, or is there any particular pattern that we're seeing out of that? And if so, how do we monitor the distribution of contracts? I do vaguely remember in days when I first started in audit, we used to statistically distribute the contracts out to see where they've parked in like a bell curve. And I know there is a standard curve for this.
Do you mean distribute departmentally or is in actual numerically? No, it's varying. Some of the contracts, and you can imagine when the officer let it and it was 25,500, they obviously, it's from that up to 50. So it's sort of a spread. I suppose I could get that information if you wanted.
Yeah, so my question was going to be, when we came up with these known numbers, and I probably know the answer, so forgive me a second, but a long time ago when I used to do statistical analysis on this, is that you should end up with a curve, like a bell curve, something like that. So you've got a low number of contracts at the beginning with low values and a low number of contracts at the end with high values. And I just wondered if in changing these, in changing the limits that we've got at the moment, how does that affect the distribution and whether or not that had been analysed? I mean, I'm not too fussed if it hasn't, but I just wondered if that kind of analysis would work.
Yeah, I'm not sure it would change the distribution because it's the strategy is, we're not saying you shouldn't do the contracts at that level. It's just the process of how you obtain them and award them is changing. So I think generally that distribution of the contracts will change over time anyway, because as Holly and the team, they're more pushing for longer contracts over longer periods, aren't you? So you could see that actually the contracts are more kind of varying more to, I don't know, it might change shape. Yeah, there might be kind of more higher over that. But like you say, you generally would expect there to be lower number of higher value contracts because they're the, you know, and the low areas of spend, they're the kind of ones that get kind of picked up to purchase cards and all that kind of stuff. So I'd probably say potentially it might not change it because we're not changing through this. We're not changing how people, you know, the values. What we're saying is that what they need to do to obtain them will change, but just part of the general procurement strategy in terms of probably will change it. Is that? Because I'm assuming it's the bell of all contracts rather than just the 25 to 50.
Yeah, the analysis is try and work out fraud. So if it's all one-sided, all at the left-hand side, then there's potentially something wrong because everybody's putting through £5,000 contracts all the time, and you don't want that being high. And then my follow-up question, which is kind of related, I suppose, is the changes that you've mentioned here. I'm assuming these are all electronically enforced on the computer procurement application or wherever software you use. If these are enforced, are we incurring a cost in modifying these changes to the procurement system?
In short, no. We control our own system, so it won't affect it.
Any other questions, colleagues? Right, okay. One comment, not a question. And as everyone knows, on the Audit Committee and officers, waivers of the Council's financial regulations, along with breaches, are a regular item on the agendas of the Audit Committee. The enhanced number and the definitions of waiver explanations will, I believe, give an improved awareness of the reasons for a waiver. And we've had this discussion many times, haven't we? And where there are current ambiguities, as the Audit Committee regularly see at their agendas, at their meetings over the years. So this amendment is a welcome one from our point of view, I would say. So I'm hoping that we see a marked improvement. And I don't know if it's next time the breaches and waivers as well as in November. Is it? Yeah. I mean, that will be too early, but that will be sort of a benchmark like going forward. So later on we'll see a marked improvement, I'm sure. And one thing we've touched on also is the training of the officers in the procurement procedure rules. That's now going to become mandatory for officers at a certain level.
Yeah, so we want to obviously go through the governance and the approvals for the CPRs, and once hopefully approved, the e-learning package will get launched with the new rules, because there's no point obviously teaching people on the old rules. So yeah. Yeah,
and then with that mandatory element, it becomes accountable. The manager in that department is accountable for breaches and waivers that come to Audit Committee, and I'm sure that they don't want to be coming in front of us every quarter or whatever it might be. Okay, that's it from me. That finally is it from me on questions and comments. Any further questions and comments, Colin, on this one? No.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you for attending and reviewing the documents, giving us comments, asking questions. It will be going to council on the 21st of September for approval. And then, as Holly says, we will be doing some comms in terms of communicating the changes across key managers and feeding that into training. So, thank you.
I'll just finalise the recommendation within the report. So I'll read out the recommendation that we have before us today. The Audit Committee requested to endorse the proposed revisions to the Contract Procedure Rules and Financial Procedure Rules, as outlined with appendices 1 to 2 to the report, respectively, and recommend their approval to full council, and that the revised documents be incorporated within the council's constitution. Is that moved, colleagues, and seconded? And we're all agreed? Right. So thank everyone for their attendance. If there's no further comments from anyone, I'm going to close the meeting. And one of our shorter meetings, I think it must be the shortest ever Audit Committee meeting. Sorry,
I was just going to say the next meeting of the Audit Committee is the November one. Just highlight in terms of if anyone's seen a cancellation in September, it's fine. Our next meeting's the November one. It's caused a little bit of, so I just wanted to mention that.